David McDonough and Kevin Gannon stood simply over the outer layer of Lancaster, opening a profound submerged cave framework. Confronting an unthinkable reality, their companion Simon Halliday had entered the cavern solo, more than 4 hours sooner, with the assumption for surfacing following 3 hours. He never showed up. Simon was known to be one of the most mind-blowing cave jumpers nearby, so his companions were left with a sensation of fear. Something must be truly off base. This is his story. Lancaster structure is important for one of Britain's most noteworthy limestone cave networks, reaching out underneath Cumbria Land. Cassia in the Yorkshire Dales, the cavern network was initially established in 1946, and from that point forward, it has invited numerous to investigate its profundities consistently of the year to day. If you have any desire to investigate or possibly plunge segments of the popular cavern, you essentially save your spot ahead of time, and you are good to go. The shockingly honest access to Lancaster opening is a sewer vent cover beneath the poth. Opening's fundamental shaft opens up, permitting talented potholers admittance to the undeniably popular EAS Society Caves and Three Nations cavern framework. The whole cave framework extends for more than 41 miles, and there are regions all through the framework that must be gotten to by plunging, as they are completely lowered. Simon Halliday, a 49-year-old dad of 2, had investigated in Pigeon Lancaster, opening ordinarily in January 4, 2020 should be simply one more jump. Simon was from the enchanting town of Clitheroe, where he consumed a greater part of his time on Earth. He was portrayed as a focused and devoted person who succeeded in all that he put his energy into, particularly when it came to active work. Yet there was one game that generally spellbound him: cave jumping. Simon had a characteristic regular ability for the game, and from the beginning he immediately became one of the most gifted cave jumpers in the country. His energy for plunging drove him to investigate probably the most difficult and remote cavern frameworks all over the planet. He had a specific interest with investigating submerged caves, which required a novel arrangement of abilities and hardware, yet everybody knew the peril that accompanied cavern plunging. After he became a dad, Simon chose to take a break from cave jumping, as the time responsibility of being a family man alongside the risks of plunging it simply wasn't worth the effort any longer. However, while on vacation in Egypt, almost 2 years after he had stopped, he got a chance to get once more into the water, so he did. It was during this outing that he accepted his jump capability, which opened up plenty of chances for him subsequent to getting back from occasion. Simon would turn into a functioning individual from the Northern Division of the Cavern Jumping Bunch, or CDGA, local area of enthusiastic and devoted cave jumpers. He was regarded and respected by his kindred jumpers, who viewed him as one of the absolute best. Simon was most popular for his tirelessness and unfaltering obligation to his objectives. He was constantly viewed as the most grounded individual from the group and never avoided the hardest difficulties of a plunge. At this point, notwithstanding this, he was known to be a very unassuming and receptive man. He was continuously ready to impart his insight and skill to others, to work on his endurance and wellness. Simon would join the running club Clayton Legends Harriers in January 2004. He generally alluded to himself as the Fat Caver in light of the fact that he got a kick out of the chance to live it up, making the rounds Friday night. So this was a method for holding his body under tight restraints. Obviously, he would proceed to contend in probably the hardest fell races as a famous fell sprinter, and his arrangement, well, it worked. His cavern plunging capacity would just enhance. January 4, 2020, Simon visited Lancaster Corridor with his 2 companions, David McDonough and Kevin Gannon. However, Simon, being an accomplished jumper who had investigated the framework before, wanted to plunge alone while his companions investigated an alternate segment of the cavern. The all-out jump time was supposed to be 3 hours on this specific day. There was a bizarrely high measure of water, streaming into the channel, which made the plunge more testing than expected in spite of the unfriendly circumstances, not entirely set in stone to continue with the jump, as he needed to finish the test that he had set for himself. Simon would be wearing a rebreather, which was purportedly still being developed at that point, and not yet prepared for by the gadget was given to him by SUMP, UK, an outdoor supplies organization, explicitly for this jump. A rebreather is a submerged breathing gadget that catches carbon dioxide from a jumper's breathed-out breath, permitting it to reuse the fundamentally lost oxygen content not long prior to entering Lancaster Hall. Simon would post via web-based entertainment, simply setting off, "Now I'll be underground, the entire day, will post something later." This would be the last post he made, as Simon plunged into the profundities of the cavern. He experienced a progression of challenges that he had not expected. The water stream was more grounded than he had expected, and he needed to apply more work to gain any headway. Regardless of this, Simon stayed cool and zeroed in, depending on his long periods of involvement and preparing to explore through the cavern. After Simon left, his companions would stand by hours, and after the 3-hour mark, there was still no indication of him. The two of them were certain that Simon understood what he was doing, and assuming he ran into anyway difficulty, well, he could deal with himself, so they chose to stand by. However, at that point, 4 hours hit an imprint that implied something must be off base. Simon wouldn't be this late. With their nervousness proceeding to increment, they ultimately chose to call the police, and salvage bunches were quickly dispatched to the site. The salvage activity would contain north of 40 individuals who were completely capable jumpers and had gone through thorough preparation for such circumstances. They started their pursuit where the cavern jumpers entered the downstream course of Lancaster opening in the event that Simon had left it. One of the frameworks elsewhere, the colleagues in Cave Jumper likewise analyzed different passages and possible exits, yet they found nothing. Not long after the salvage jumpers entered the water, the pursuit would end tragically. Simon was found around 196 ft down the sump. They found him following 14 minutes of plunging. The salvage jumpers would take him back to the sump post chamber and eliminate him from the water. Yet their apprehensions were affirmed. Simon was gone. Simon's oxygen supply hose seemed to have been cut off or torn out anyway. Was muddled if this happened during the jump or later. The recuperation, the resulting extensive and testing extraction back to the fell's surface, included all colleagues. However, Simon was ultimately lifted from the cavern, where he could rejoin his family. Vulnerability encompasses the misfortune's genuine subtleties. As referenced beforehand, there was a more prominent than normal progression of water into the passage. Despite the fact that Simon didn't believe this to be an issue, it appeared to be that during his time in the opening, the water's momentum power developed. This might have made him utilize more air on his return trip, where he would have been battling the current, on the off chance that Simon had been under pressure and needed to inhale all the more vigorously on the grounds that his air was running out. This issue could have deteriorated. Obviously, this is all hypothesis. However, Simon's plunge PCE journey information likewise upheld the possibility that he had moved to his bailout choice once his rebreathing contraption bombed the hardware, utilized a straight squeezing into the rebreather as per the salvage jumper. In the event that such were the case, the fitting could never have unscrewed by him, since it was an elbow fitting with a 90 twist. Subsequently, Simon was in a test of skill and endurance when his rebreather fizzled and he almost made it out. The mishap would be delegated as suffocating as the authority reason for death. Clearly, the occurrence broke the hearts of his family and the plunging local area. All in all, the Pegasus Jumping Club would present a commemoration on Simon, and how much remarks and stories is a demonstration of the everyday routine he experienced. John, in like manner, his dear companions, post summarizes all that you want to be familiar with Simon. A person like Simon would have battled to grapple with the tricky beginning of advanced age, close by the unfavorable impacts of one's capacities. Yet he accomplished much more in his abbreviated life than most others do in their 3 school years, and afterward tenure past, he was a certified liberal guy continuously ready to give his chance to help. Simon was one of the northern segment's most encouraging fresher individuals, and his misfortune was an unpleasant reality for us all. Farewell, old buddy.